Hi there, everybody. My name is Dylan Jones. This is an absolute treat to be getting up here and talking about analytics, right? From what a developer's perspective. That is truly an honor to be up here. Today, we're going to be looking at real data. God forbid, from our last game, got featured by Google, Apple, Humble Bundle, Steam, the usual stuff like that. And again, I'll be providing a pretty high-level tips and insights, but again, very actionable insights for beginning to intermediate sessions here. And then after me, Mark here will be going through the lower level stuff of how to name your event date and all that jazz. So this should all be very applicable. To dive in there, right? So analytics are for everyone, truly, right? You may be saying that's kind of a generic way to open an analytics talk, right? If you've used analytics, maybe you want to oh, can't you segment everyone in different demographics or whatever? No, I really do believe that analytics are for everyone, right? The only caveat I would add to this maybe is analytics are for everyone who's making a game, right? But analytics, right, there's this unfortunate stigma right now with analytics that says, oh, well, I'm not really a business suit making a free-to-play game, so I don't need analytics or whatever that is, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And it hurts me like a dagger, right? Because there's so many incredible creative aspects that you can improve upon, even solely as a premium experience, as whatever type of genre or platform that you're on with analytics, right? So analytics, again, it's what the big guys use here. The big guys use this to get to make informed decisions. And now, with the sake of Unity Analytics and all this jazz, even the little guys, everybody in here, can make these informed decisions with that, right? So I just want to really instill, how impossible this was for us in the past, right? Like, analytics were really hard. You have to store that data. You'd have to, worry about not messing it up. Either way, you'd have to fix it. And now, since 5.2, everybody in here has analytics, right? Already in your Unity projects. That is awesome. That's great. So anyway, that's the importance of analytics. I'm so glad you're all here because I really want to cover some stuff. So again, if there's one thing you took away there is that you don't need to starve yourself from that data, right? From making informed decisions. So to avoid starving yourself, I want to talk about the breakfast, the lunch, and the dinner of game analytics, right? And so that is retention, segments, and revenue, of course. Right, so once you get a taste of analytics, these are the three pillars that I really think you'll be standing on the daily, basically. And so I've been told this is a beginner to intermediate session. Can I get a quick raise of hands if you've heard of, let's say, all three of these before? Can you raise your hand? Cool, awesome. Oh, and we have some new folks over here. That's great. So I'll tailor some of the content stuff, but let's just dive right in here. So the first one is retention. Okay, the most important meal of the day, right? Just like breakfast. And retention, I know developers that only just look at retention. So this is the only KPI, which stands for Key Performance Indicator, that they look at. That's all they care about, right? And that's totally valid. Retention is that important, right? If you had to pick one thing to just solely iterate and improve upon, it's going to be retention here. Okay, so retention, really quick, if you're having a conversation about it maybe later at the party or something and you want to talk about your numbers, retention is measured by saying D1 is 10% or something, and D7 is 10%. And so what that stands for is day, and so day 1 and day 7. So let's say I install your game. What are the chances that I'm going to come back tomorrow? That's D1, right? So 10%, you can probably get that number up here and there. In general, a benchmark is 40% for day 1, and then on day 7, which again are players coming back on that specific day, on day 7 is 10%, but we're going to talk a little bit in a second on why I think benchmarks are seriously overrated, so don't worry about that stuff yet. Speaking of parties and all that jazz, right, once, just literally last week, I was talking to a friend about retention, and he said, our numbers are great. We're looking at 80% for day 6 and all this jazz. I was like, wow, 80%, that's insane. Those are really good numbers. Can I call dibs on your Lamborghini ride that you're going to get next week or whatever? He's like, what are you talking about? And what it had turned out to be is that we were on different pages in terms of how we were measuring retention. So I don't want anybody in this room to make a possible embarrassing mistake, right, where you're talking about your numbers, but you have something way off or way up or way down or whatever that is. So it turns out that he was measuring his analytics with Flurry, and they do rolling retention, which inflates numbers. And so I was measuring it more conservatively or whatever it was. We got on the same page, but always when you're using analytics, especially when you're first jumping in there, whether you kind of raise your hand or not, I'm sure, check how this stuff is being measured. Literally click on the question marks. Unity does it the more, I think, the more standard way of literally it's just the people who jump in on that day. That's the conservative way. Usually the conservative way is the right way of doing it in analytics, but it kind of ends up with all your numbers being small, but that's totally fine. And while retention is, it talks about all the time in free-to-play, right? So, of course, more likely to spend players the more they're in your game, right? So you want to keep that retention going for as long as possible. But again, please don't ever say, well, we're a premium game, so we don't need any kind of analytics for that, right? Because if you ever do an update or you ever do anything like that, you can look back and say, wow, we have these issues on level 5 or whatever that is. So I want to take a closer look at what actually level 5 may be in a funnel here. So here up here on the left, you can see real data. This is our last game, Battle Group 2. This is data from our 1.0. And again, the one thing I want to point out here is that it's funnel data from the entire game, right? So it's all 30 levels. That's a pretty long time. Funnels can stretch down to be very small measurements or huge measurements like this one. So the main thing to note here is, so all those blue lines, that's basically levels. So we can see the 2.5 completion rate there. That's, for somebody beating the entire game. I've heard that's about standard for, a game like this, talking to friends. But we want to talk about getting those numbers up, right? That's why we're all here. So let's zoom in on this. This is that same data, level 1.0, right? And we can see our biggest drop-offs over here between what do y'all think? I mean, I think 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 are the biggest drop-offs there, right? And so the funnel gives us this understanding, right? Now, immediately I know, whoa, okay, well, there's something going on over there. But the number one mistake that I don't want any of you all to make is when I talk to people using analytics, first off, is they don't track their initial experience. They're tutorial enough, they're onboarding enough, right? It's those first 5 crisp moments where the player, for the first time, steps into your world. Make sure, whether you're caring about getting money from them or just critical success, make sure that those first steps are beautiful, right? And how you want the player to experience this stuff, right? So please, I highly recommend tracking the first 5 minutes of your game. So maybe that is, you want to put those steps as close together as possible. These steps are really far apart in levels, right? But it could totally be presses start, picks up the sword, slashes the first enemy, gets the gold, gets the upgrade. Maybe that all just happened in 20 seconds or whatever. But the closer you put those steps in, the more accurate your understanding will be. Well, I see the problem right here. Oh, it turns out nobody was picking up the gold. Maybe we should make that a more color that people can see out of the sand or whatever that may be, right? You'll know your game perfectly. So put those steps close together for the first 5 minutes of your game. And we did this. And the other reason I like to point out here is this is perfect that you're all learning this because you're the developers and you're the designers, right? So one quick note to note here is that sometimes a third person will come in and say, oh, I can do your analytics or whatever it is, right? But they're not going to know the game as well as you. They're not going to be able to look at this chart and know exactly what's happening here, right? So you'll have the best understanding of your game. And so when I look at this, I go, oh, level 5. There's a huge drop-off to level 6. I know that there's a boss fight at level 5. So I'm going to say, wow, okay, well, that's either way too hard, or if we're not purposely trying to monetize them in a certain way in a free-to-play game or something like that, what's going on with this drop-off? And so we can look at that. So I changed that boss fight a little bit, and this is levels in the 1.1 version of the game. Take a look at that. Now again, whenever you see pixels of improvement, we're talking about thousands of players, right? Because it's such a huge funnel. So I think these are for a 1.1. That's a great gain. And so what did we do, right? This funnel certainly improves its numbers, but we made that boss fight a little bit easier. We adjusted our in-game currency, our reward stuff for that. We did a bunch of little menu feedback things because we looked at this, right? We made an informed decision about what we can move and tweak and basically improve on our game yet. So we can notice that those same drop-offs between 3 and 4 are very much reduced. 5 and 6 look a lot better. But also, in addition to that stuff, because we focused on our initial experience, right, that beginning tutorial section there, look at how it goes back and trickles down to the rest of all those steps, right? So this isn't just about making money right? This isn't even just about perfecting your FTUI, right? Your first-time user experience. This is about getting more people in and improving, making actionable insights in there. So if you don't care about money, right? These are new fans. These are potential new people right here. This is maybe an IGN review or whatever that made it on the better side of that funnel. Okay, so moving on, segments, right? So the buffet, the lunchtime here, right? Its segment is simple. It's just a group of players, but this group of players could be a segment of players that come in on launch day, people who are really excited, right? They could be people who come in from a very specific website that heard about your game. They could be, maybe it's a segment of players who just bought that awesome glowing sword, right? Or maybe it's that 3% who actually beat the game. But segments tend to be discussed in a more free-to-play advertising sense because they're really, really important when you're saying, basically when you want to get like any ROI, right, return on investment. You say, I want $5, I'm going to pay somebody to install my game, and I'm going to check which segments come back and actually spend money, hopefully more than $5 so I can keep doing it, or something like that, right? Segments could be anywhere from, in your whole CPI, cost per install in UA, user acquisition for your process on different areas and segments of players. So maybe it's that website, or maybe it's advertising with Unity ads, and you get a really good segment through that. Or maybe with Chartboost or Google or something like that. Those segments, they're not as like diehard players, right? So you go, oh, that segment with Unity ads or with somebody else was really good. Let's advertise with them again. Let's try and get them into the game. But as always, segments are not just about advertising or making money, right? They're also what? They're about informed decisions here, okay? So we're going to dive back into, again, real data. Here we go. And so we have platform 1 here in orange and platform 2 in blue. And this is real data here. So it looks like, judging from this, we got featured by a certain platform, orange platform there in the beginning. But now that we're looking at this, we've been fixing bugs, we've been iterating on stuff. We've kind of let that spike die down a little bit, and now blue's come up here. But maybe we actually currently have more players playing on the blue platform than we do on the orange platform. But orange platform featured us or did this jazz, we want to support them. So this is still a very difficult decision, right? If you had to pick where your next content goes, where's it going to go? I don't know, I'll let you all decide. But at least you can make this decision while being informed. Okay, so the other element that segments are really important, right, is, again, finding those certain types of players. So maybe you have a cross-platform game, and you want to advertise on PC Gamer, and you want to advertise on Touch Arcade or something. Cool, so it's very easy with Unity Analytics to measure who's actually coming in and getting this stuff, right? And this is what we, as developers and game people, we do on the absolute daily. We do this all the time. Is we go, whoa, we found this really cool, almost like hipster spot where we can find traffic and people love our game, and we want to get in on that and keep using that more. So the last thing with segments that I want to say is I see people go crazy for this stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, this is insane. This is going to change the way I do development. Yes, I think it will. But that being said, don't go too crazy, right? So whether it's segments or general analytics, when you're first starting out, certainly if you didn't raise your hand earlier, don't track analytics and basically metrics like this that have too many variables attached to them. There's some really cool stuff you can do with stores and making money and checking stuff down later in the track. But if you're looking at something and it's being changed by 1,000 different things in your game and your community, that won't be very direct, right? So just grab that simple thing there where that won't change and just say, look, we can measure this, we can refine it, we can push it out, and we can measure it again. Just that really simple stuff. The only caveat to that may be with vanity metrics, where it's really cool to be able to say, over 1 million battleships sunk or whatever in the game. But if those vanity metrics are starting to actually interfere with the data you're really getting, well, then maybe that's worth taking a second look at it, right? So, revenue. Bringing home the bacon. Literally, sometimes, this metaphor is a little bit too close to home, right? It's about putting dinner on the table. Certainly, it's about paying your bills, right? Revenue touches on everything we've discussed. So, again, retention. If players are in your game for longer, they're more likely to spend, right? If you are advertising to the proper segments, they're more likely to come in and be diehard fans or whatever that may be and affect your revenue, right? So those are like the pillars of this final pillar, right? But of course, there is no silver lining to making revenue, or at least that's a very different talk and a longer talk at least. You will know how to make money with your game, Hopefully, you're definitely look into it, but you will know best, certainly better than I, right? So I just want to provide a mindset that's been passed on to me by people who are much more experienced in analytics than I am. And it's a mindset that has worked really well for our team. And so, honestly, it's something we don't talk enough about. And that is that data can lie to you, okay? Don't ever forget that data can lie to you. The part of the skills with analytics is this bizarre combination, right, of where you're looking at hard data, and then you're trusting your gut at the same time, and you're like, well, something doesn't seem quite right here, right? Or maybe it's surrendering your gut where you're like, wow, is that really how players are playing my game? That's crazy, right? And part of the skill, something that you'll all get much better with in analytics, is beginning to early identify some of those issues. And really be trusting your gut there, but knowing when the data is that weird combination there, right? So the data above of revenue is what you'll all have in your analytics dashboard. If you check out analytics on Unity, of course, it's from the Angry Bots demo. And something like this, where it just goes straight from verified revenue to total revenue. We'll go back real quick and back to total revenue. This is cool, but like this will never match that well, right? I mean, things go wrong. You put something in the wrong place. There was a series of articles last week about rampant mobile piracy. Things happen, right? And that's okay. The thing that I know I've told you multiple things to take home with you today. Hopefully you're learning more than one. But if you had to pick one, there's no shame in second-guessing yourself, particularly with analytics. Everybody's wrong all the time, especially on our team. I know everybody else is wrong on other teams as well that I talk to. That's completely fine. Whether you raised your hand or you didn't, I'm certainly just starting into this. But analytics, for me, for a game designer, right, is exploring a rabbit hole. You're asking a question, and you're going down this rabbit hole, and you're like, where is this going to lead me? And analytics, yeah, they can kind of help you migrate this maze, right? They can literally, this is why it's such an incredible tool, right? They can literally say, they can show you, oh, my game is 10 times better than it was last week. That's an incredible tool. That's worth learning. No matter, I think, what other element or role that you have on a team like that, I think that's absolutely worth it. But never stop exploring. Never stop second-guessing that data. Never stop iterating. Just keep going and keep going, right? Last thing, and I think this is super important, especially when we're talking about analytics. It's all analytics. It's kind of life advice, but just don't compare yourself to others. To say it the best way that I can, right? There are people in this industry who boast their numbers. There are people in this industry who simply lie about them, right? There are people who have millions and millions of dollars to spend to re-engage users to increase their retention, right? That's not everybody in this room, and that's okay. That's fine, right? So don't compare yourself to others. Maybe, if anything, if you want to talk to somebody, go out and find or make a friend who has a similarly scoped game to yours, who has a similarly budgeted game to yours, and a very similar in genre game to yours, because those are all things that will vastly change any of these numbers, right? So don't compare yourself to others. Just keep iterating on what you have from last week and what you've been doing. Make your game better and better, okay? So finally, I want to say this. Boiling water is easy, but learning to cook, it takes time. It's hard. So that sticks with the metaphor. But a lot of these concepts that you've heard about, are going to be needing to experiment. But you'll get there. Next week, if you're striving for data and you want to have instant ramen, that's fine. Keeps you alive. Believe me, I know. But if next month after that you want to have steak, maybe you're going to share a recipe with a friend, right? You're going to learn from each other. You're going to do all this stuff. So again, just keep iterating, keep exploring. That's really all analytics are. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing your games. And I guess that's pretty much it for me, actually. My name is Dylan Jones. I write about this stuff on a blog all the time. You can shoot me a note at dylan@thedylanjones.com. That's where the blog is as well. I also talk about this stuff. You can't get me to shut up about it on Twitter all the time. So I'm at TDJ, just T, D, and J. And I think if you're not all rushing off to go improve your games with the awesome power of analytics, I think we have some time for questions, actually. But seriously, thank you all so much for coming. If you like this kind of content, fill out an evaluation, and thank you, seriously. Thank you. Cheers. Stop. Thank you. Yeah, totally.
Hi. How much raw data can I download from Unity Analytics, and what's the retention like?
How much real data can you download from
Raw
Unity?
data.
Raw data. So, oh, by the way, I should have mentioned, again, I am a game developer, so some of these crazy technical Unity-specific questions I may not be able to answer as much as the people in the front row, but my understanding is that there is like raw data export, and you can get a lot, or if not all of the data that you need to send over.
Let me put it into perspective. 20 million users, and maybe there is a data point every 5 seconds. Can I actually use Unity Analytics to pull the data down into my BI system and do some analysis on it in-house?
Yes, you can, absolutely, yeah. So depending on how many analytic events you actually spend specifically, like you mentioned in 5 seconds, and that'll change no matter what that is. But yes, with Raw Data Expert, you can grab that, you can throw it into whatever kind of visualization software you want. There's a lot of very specific analytic tools that help you visualize stuff. You can also just use Excel if you want. But yeah, you can totally pull all that stuff down from Unity Analytics, it's great. And again, there's also be a more lower level talk as well, where you can ask those like integrations to BI systems and that kind of stuff on the next one as well. But to the best of my knowledge, you absolutely can do all that stuff, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, cheers.
Do you happen to know how Unity Analytics handles offline data if the user's offline at the time?
Yes, my understanding is that it will catch it and then send it off later.
Cool.
So that's the right way to be doing it. They're smart folks over there. Yeah, totally. I think are we good? Any other questions here talking about analytics? I know that was a lot to take in, so I think we're good, yeah? Cool, all right, everybody, we'll go out there and make some more kick-ass games. Really appreciate the time, and please come up and say hello if you have any more questions. Awesome, thanks very much. Enjoy your night. Cheers.